Dynamo is a visual programming platform which has been integrated into several Autodesk applications. The integration into Alias is very powerful as it allows you to create your own tools which, for most regards, exactly look and feel like normal Alias tools. Hi folks, I'm Gigi, and in this video I will show you how to create your own first simple Dynamo Player tool, including how to put it on a shelf with an own self-designed icon. So, let's get started. Before we actually jump into Dynamo, let's create, first of all, an object, because what we're going to do is we're going to create a very simple translate tool with Dynamo. So once we've created a simple object like this sphere, we are going to start Dynamo, and it can be found in the Transform tab and there on the bottom right corner. Keep the left mouse button pressed, because the default entry is the Dynamo Player, which we are not going to start. The Dynamo Player is meant to be used to load Dynamo scripts and use them like Alias tools inside of Alias, while when you are going to develop those scripts, you need to start Dynamo instead, which is the lower entry. So let's do that. Choose the lower entry. And then, we are asked if we are fine with data collection. I am. Want Dynamo to be a better tool. And let's spend a few seconds here on the main screen here, because I want to point out 3 links to you. The first one is the discussion forum. If you have any general Dynamo questions or also Alias-specific Dynamo questions, you can ask them here. This is the general Dynamo forum. If you have Alias-specific Dynamo questions, you can choose the category Alias, which is here. And then you could ask your Alias-specific Dynamo questions here. And I'm trying to keep an eye on this forum, just trying to be active there in the future. The second link I'd like to point out is the Dynamo Primer. It's the Dynamo online help. Super complete. I can only recommend it. This is the way I learned Dynamo. Several hours of reading, but great content, and lies a very solid foundation then for your future Dynamo skills. So if you can spare some time, this is a great way to learn Dynamo. And the third link I'd like to point out are the Alias Dynamo resources. So Autodesk is providing you with Alias-specific Dynamo content. So in case you haven't read through these different sections here in the Alias Online help, I can also really recommend this one here. All right, but let's continue here. We are going to create a new script, and then we are in the Dynamo base screen. On the left, we have something similar to the palette in Alias. All of the Dynamo available nodes can be found here. And it's basically similar to the palette in Alias, where you can find every tool. And similar to Alias, you're later on unlikely to access it through here. Most of the time, you're going to use the inbound search button here in the canvas, which is similar to the marking menus in Alias. It's just much quicker. If you're looking for something, for example, like a sphere node, you just type in here sphere, and you're looking for the node you're looking for instead of going through the long clicking here on the left. Anyway, so let's get a first node. We want to select geometry from the Alias side and bring it into Dynamo. And the node which is going to do that is the select from Alias as list. If you have an older version of Dynamo, this will just be called select from Alias, but we can ignore the slight difference of those two nodes. They basically work the same. I have a separate video on where the differences are. So we want to translate objects, and therefore I'm going to set the selection filter here accordingly. And then if I'm pressing select, it directly minimizes Dynamo and brings us back to Alias. And here we can then select the object we want to translate, which is the sphere. Press on send to Dynamo. Now we got to manually go back to Dynamo. Reasons for that I can explain in a separate video. But now we do have this object here inside of Dynamo. And maybe it's a good time to talk about the different display modes inside of Dynamo. It's similar to like in Alias. The node view here is something like, see it as an object list in Alias. It contains the whole structure of your model, and you can see everything there. This is basically this view. You have a second view, which is the canvas view, which is like the Alias 3D canvas. And you can switch between the views here with these 2 buttons in the top right corner, or with the shortcut Control B, which I recommend you to memorize. You'll use it a lot. So if I now switch to the background preview navigation, I can press the zoom to fit, which is the lookat of Alias. And here you see the sphere we have created on the Alias side, selected and sent to Dynamo. So switching back to the node view. And by the way, the navigation in this is similar to Alias, so you can press Shift Alt, left mouse button to rotate, middle mouse button to pan, and right mouse button to zoom. But you can also just use the mouse buttons here, so you don't have to press Shift Alt. Just convenient, you can use the 3 mouse buttons to navigate your geometry view here inside of Dynamo. So back to the node view. Right mouse button click in the canvas brings up the search, and just make sure that you have a blinking cursor icon here. If you don't have that, it can easily go. If you've been, for example, down here, you see it's gone now, and this means it has lost its input focus. So when you're typing now, yeah, now I pressed F, which is obviously a hotkey to zoom, but you can type in and nothing is happening. So pay attention to that this is blinking, and if it's not, click into it again. So we're looking for a translate tool. So I'm typing in translate, and here we'll find several possible nodes which do what we want. So we're looking here, you can see if you're hovering over the entity, you can see what the input is and also what the output is. So we are looking for a translate tool which takes geometry as input. For example, you have also other nodes which select a coordinate system, for example. This is not what we are looking for. We want to input geometry. We want to input the X, Y, and Z translation values, and we want the output to be geometry. So this is basically the node we want. Clicking on that, it adds the node to the canvas. Similar as the 3D view of the geometry canvas, you can middle mouse button pan your node view. You can use the middle mouse button to zoom in and out. And with the left mouse button, you can select nodes, and keeping the left mouse button pressed, you can drag them around. And as you see here, the node which is selected, if this is linked to geometry creation, the geometry is highlighted in blue. Right? So the translate node hasn't done anything yet. The select node is linked to the sphere here, and therefore the sphere is highlighted in blue in the background of the 3D canvas. Okay, so on the geometry translate node, you see that 3 entries down here are blue, and the upper one is red. Red means, hey, I have a missing input, which I definitely need to execute this node. So we got to feed geometry into this one here. We are doing that by left mouse button clicking on the geometry list output here of the node. Just one. And now I have nothing pressed. I'm feeding a wire, and then I'm moving my mouse over the geometry part here, left mouse click again, and now we fed the sphere into the translate node, which has directly created a copy of our sphere with the X, Y, and Z values of it. You can see here the default value of those is 0. And this is why they are blue. They have default values. If you don't feed anything into it, Dynamo will just assume that you're fine with the default value, which is 0. But of course, we don't want to translate something with a value of 0. Instead, we want to be able to choose how much the translation shall happen. And therefore, we need sliders. Right mouse button click again on the canvas and type in slider. We can choose between number sliders, which is like 1.7832, and integer slider, which only takes whole values, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, I rather translate something with delta like 1.76 value, so I'm fine. I'll use the integer slider here, and I'll feed this one into the X translation. And then I'm going to rename the slider here, because this is the X value. I'm going to name it accordingly. And if you click here on the little drop-down button here, you can see the minimum value of the slider, the maximum value, and the step size. And I want to allow a translation, let's say, between -100 and +100. And I want the default value to be 0. So now I need several sliders, because I also want to have an X and a Z slider. And I can just, when this node is selected, I can press Ctrl-C for copy, Ctrl-V for paste, and another time because I want 2 more sliders. And because I've copied them, these sliders have the same min and max range as the X slider, which is what I want. So I'm going to rename this one, double-clicking to Y, hitting enter to accept, and this one here I'm going to rename to Z hitting enter to accept, and then I'm left mouse button clicking just to add the wires to this input node here. And then next thing we need to know, we want these sliders to show up in our Alias tool UI. And this selection node here does it. So if I'm clicking left mouse button to select this one, now right mouse button over it, you can see that here's an is input option, which is checked by default, because if you want to select something from the alias, it only makes sense that this node is shown on the alias side as in the tool UI. And therefore the default here, this one is on. For other nodes inside of Dynamo, it's not that clear. You know, for example, you can have this slider just on the Dynamo side, maybe for debugging purposes and stuff like that. Dynamo doesn't know if you want the alias user to have this slider visible on the alias side. And therefore we need to tell Dynamo that it should be visible. So we are selecting this node, left mouse button, right mouse button click, and we click once here to activate this input option. And now right mouse button click again, we can see it's activated, great. Right mouse button over here, activate this input, right mouse button here, activate this input. And now we have 3 sliders which will be visible on the alias side when this script is being started in the Dynamo Player. And then the next thing we want to do is we want to send the geometry back to alias. So send to alias node. And then we are feeding the output of this node here back to send to alias. And then you see here a warning, workspace must be saved on disk. And the reason for that is any kind of geometry which is created in Dynamo and is being sent to alias only exists when alias is running this script here. And because this script which we are going to create is not saved inside of the wire, it will be saved on disk. Alias needs to know, hey, where on disk is the script which you have linked to my alias model, which shall create this sphere here. And to be able to find it, we need to have it on disk first, right? So let's save this one here. And I'm just going to save this one in my download section and call it translate, save. And now the warning has disappeared. And what we can do right now is, for example, we can move the X, Y, and Z slider here for, let's say, all 3, like 100. And pressing Ctrl B to change to the geometry view inside of Dynamo, we can see now we have this here as the original input. And then we've translated it. So Dynamo's created a copy, has translated it. And this one here has been sent now to alias. And as you can see here, now we have 2 spheres, but this is something we don't want, right? We want the Dynamo tool to rather replace the original input. And this is something we're going to do right now. So Ctrl B again. And this works the following way. The send to alias node has also 2 more nodes here. One which accepts a Boolean and another one which has asking for source geometry. So we are creating a Boolean option, true or false. And let's put this one directly below the selection node here. And so the order you have them from top to bottom is also the order these options will show in the tool UI on the alias side then. So selecting the Boolean option, we want this to be an input on the alias side. And this one we are going to call keep original. So we are letting the user decide if they want to delete the input and just get the just want to have their translated result on the alias side, or if they want to keep the original. If you're saying keep original true, and then basically with true, the input is kept. With false, the input will be deleted, which we don't see at the moment, but it would be once we update. But when we're doing that, we need to also tell Dynamo what to delete, basically, right? And this is the input. And if you now save this one, then we're having our first Dynamo script, which we can start in the Dynamo Player, which we'll do right now. So back on the alias side, I'm doing a pick object because I don't want Dynamo to be active in the background. And here you see now that due to our programming on the Dynamo side, we have the result of the translated sphere here inside of Alias, which I'm going now to delete because we don't want that. We want to now use the Dynamo Player to just show you that our script is now similar to an Alias tool. So left mouse button pressed here, starting the Dynamo Player, browsing for the script we've just created in the download section, translate in. And then here we can select the sphere. You can say auto update. And if you keep the original, you see the original is kept, and we can just move the sphere in X, Y, or Z direction. And again, if you're saying keep original off, then we're just having the translated result. And once you say pick nothing, pick object, this is a new sphere. So next thing is we are going to look into how to put it on a shelf and give it an icon. Let's go to Windows here, create a new shelf, and just going to call it GG. So let's start the Dynamo Player, and the Dynamo Player has currently loaded our script which we've just written. So when you want to add a Dynamo Player script, make sure it's loaded in the Dynamo Player, then say pick object. Now left mouse button press to expand the menu here, and now use the middle mouse button to drag the Dynamo Player onto your shelf. This script here is linking now to the one which has been active in the Dynamo Player when you dragged it onto the shelf, which is our translate one. So if you now save our preferences, we already added our translate tool here onto the shelf, and we have a new tool basically. Obviously, we want to make this one here a little bit better. By control left mouse button double click, you can give it a long name. Let's call it Dynamo Translate. And the short one shall be DP for Dynamo Player, space, and then TRSL, that's only 3, okay, TL for translate. Okay, and then you see short name is changed to Dynamo Player TRL. So now we have a good name. If you double click on it, yeah, I'm actually not sure where the long name shows up. Let's hover over it, and yeah, here's where the long name shows up. Dynamo Translate is down here, and the short name is below the icon. Next thing we want to do is we want to give this one here a different icon to make it more distinguishable. Again, control left mouse button double click, and you can export the current icon. Let's also go to the download section and go here for Dynamo Player, PNG, save. We're going to replace it. And now we have in the download section the original icon, which we can then edit, for example, by sending it to Paint. And here we can now make any kind of changes. For example, we can choose the fill. Let's go for red background color just to make it very distinguishable. We can fill the background here to red. We can save this one. And now, obviously, you can do more sensible changes to this. But now we can, here, back on the window, which we have opened with control left mouse button double click, we can choose a new icon. And we'll choose the change one here. Press OK. And now you see we got a new icon here with a red background. And that's basically it. We've created our first Dynamo Player tool, put it on the shelf with a unique icon. You can save this one in the preferences and have, for the future, every time we fire up Alias, a new tool on our shelf. I hope you found this video helpful, and see you in the next one.